All right, welcome to Decentralized News, your weekly brief of the biggest stories affecting the cryptoverse. I am your host, Piter, joined as always by my friend Ozzy over there in Canada. What is up, buddy? Long time no see.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Good to see you again.
So, big story. What we got? Bitcoin flirting with an all-time high. ETH has been pumping. We were down to like 1800. It's over 42. It is ETH dominance is going up. ETH against Bitcoin is going up. So we're seeing a little bit of a change, a little bit of glimmer of hope that an alt season is coming. And one of the reasons we've seen the rise of DATCOs. What's a DATCO?
DATCOs are these basically this new category of public companies that are kind of at an intersection of crypto and TradFi. They're digital asset treasury companies. So they are buying either ETH or a whole slew of different cryptos
So
and
far,
altcoins.
mostly Bitcoin. ETH is coming up. And this is like adds on to the Bitcoin and ETH ETFs. And we don't have any altcoins yet, but there's, some coming down the pike. But anyway, go right ahead.
They essentially they invest in them as kind of treasury assets. And so much like strategy or MicroStrategy, they hold these assets, and that's more or less where the hype and the value comes from based on their holdings of these different tokens, whether it's ETH, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's XRP, BNB. There's one that holds Doge, one that holds Athena, a few that
Sui,
hold Hype,
Sui on the board.
Litecoin on the board, BitTensor, and Tron as well. So
Yeah, we haven't seen like kind of noticeable missing ADA. Kind of some of the I don't know what you want to call them dinosaur coins, but previous cycle coins.
yeah, that's it. Those are kind of your notable missing ones. The fact that Athena and Doge and Litecoin are all on the list is interesting. BitTensor as well, a little bit interesting to see that, and Tron as
XRP.
well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I found a pretty cool article. It's out of galaxy.com, a research report talking about what's going on and the numbers. BCT treasury companies are holding over 750,000 BTC, and that represents about 4% of the circulating supply. But I have seen more current estimates that if you take public and private holdings, we're talking about 1.5 million BTC, and that's 7% of the supply. So to give this a little context, the Bitcoin ETF, which has been one of the most successful ETFs in history, holds 5 or 6% of supply. So a very significant number. You put those two together, we're getting towards 15%, or over 10% for sure. Now ETH,
Absolutely.
oh, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so ETH on the other hand, whole ETH treasury companies hold about 1.3 million ETH, or about 1% of the ETH circulating supply. And like you mentioned, new entrants are diversifying beyond Bitcoin and ETH. So kind of like a sign of the alt season. You could see this being a narrative in the alt season, but it's small amounts, and there's some of the companies that we mentioned. Now, currently, these are creating a positive feedback loop for cryptocurrency prices. But if this category grows big enough, a potential unwind of this trade could conceivably have opposite effect. There are some that argue that this risk is simply theoretical, though, because if you exclude strategy, the DATCOs are relatively small players holding less than 32 billion, which is less than 1% of the total market cap of crypto. Now, you were saying that that's still a pretty significant number, and it should grow, assuming there's an alt season and this narrative continues.
Exactly. And the thing is they're just talking about DATCOs owning 1%, but if you combine that with the 5 or 6% of supply of Bitcoin alone that's being held in the ETFs, and I'm not quite sure what the ETH ETFs are holding right now, but assuming about half that, even 2.5% of ETH supply, if we start seeing that unwind, there will also be unwinding in the ETFs
Right.
and
Right.
any other leverage. So just traditional leverage within the market will then be cascaded as well.
Mm.
And so there 1% is significant enough that it could definitely have an impact on a drive down. Like if you're looking for the reason for why after the blow up top we still go down 60, 70, 80%, I would say
Yeah.
that DATCOs pose probably one of the number one reasons why that's likely to happen in my mind.
Yeah, I guess the argument is a lot of them are taking on bad debt that they'll have to service, and as the price goes down, they'll be forced to sell. But that's kind of the counter argument that it won't be a big deal, potentially, is because Strategy has good debt, and they're a big enough company where they won't have to necessarily unwind it. And, Sailor seems like a mega bull. Like he's not going to want to get rid of his Bitcoin. It doesn't seem like. But to your point, it's still a significant enough percentage to kind of kick off a cascade.
Exactly. And just because Strategy doesn't sell, because the 1% of crypto's total market cap excludes Strategy. And so if you think about, Strategy won't sell, but there's still that 1% that's sitting around. And probably if we keep seeing, the growth of these companies in the next couple months, that could easily exceed 2%, maybe 3% as we get to kind of the hype blow off top, and potentially the same with the ETFs. And so that's very easy to unwind. And yes, there's going to be some companies that survive. They maybe aren't doing it with as bad debt, or they end up getting bought once they're below their NAV by Strategy to acquire their Bitcoin. If they're a Bitcoin treasury company, there's still going to be enough potential pressure and fears if it happens once or twice that it will cause a general unwind from many of these companies and from the crypto market in general. So it'll be interesting.
We'll be watching this story for sure. Now we were talking about MicroStrategy. There's been some hype, some additional hype around MicroStrategy, and will they enter the S&P 500 and kind of the unlock of investing that brings with it? Just because a lot of funds just auto invest a percentage into everything in the S&P 500. So there's some hype around them potentially entering the S&P 500. They were in the Nasdaq. They are in the Nasdaq 100, or they at least were.
No, they got added. They got added.
They're in it, but there's a part of this story that it's not. They could be taken out, and it has to do with how they're. It's because they have revenue from their business that they're even able to stay in the Nasdaq. So they have their original business. MicroStrategy's old company, and that's what's keeping them in the Nasdaq 100. If they were strictly crypto, apparently they wouldn't be allowed to be in there. But anyway, so we found this article, and it explained that to be eligible, the S&P 500 inclusion, the company must post positive total earnings across the past 4 quarters. So their eligibility hinges on Bitcoin's ability to remain above 95,000 by the end of September, which is, historically bearish month. So, the further along we get, the less likely the odds are. But he puts it at like 93% chance that this one particular analysis puts it at like 93% chance that it stays above that. But still, the inclusion isn't guaranteed. Profitability remains just one factor, and the S&P committee has full discretion over which companies join the benchmark. So I thought that was interesting to keep in mind. And I'm assuming NASDAQ has the same, and they could take them off. But, things are looking good, just in terms of the general vibe on the regulatory side.
Yeah.
S&P 500 is described as the holy grail for companies like MicroStrategy because it would mean placement in huge indexes, like the biggest indexes, the SPY, the VOO, offering traditional investors some exposure to MicroStrategy.
Yeah, like if you think about the S&P 500, more than half of Americans' retirement funds at least hold a proportion of the VOO or as part of their investment. That the S&P 500 and VOO and SPY are both considered some of the biggest, if not the biggest, ETFs in the world. So that's definitely something to watch. And to think about this, Bitcoin normally only goes down, like on average, somewhere around 15% in September. That's like its normal negative downfall. And so if you were looking at that from the price of Bitcoin today, that would mean that Bitcoin would reach just about 100K. So it would go and tap about 100K, which means it would still close above the 95,000 that MicroStrategy would require. So something to note, does it actually tap, like do we potentially see higher before September? And so maybe it only taps 110 because we came we tapped just below 100K in June. So to go back and revisit that area would be a little bit odd. It'd be more likely we're kind of looking to maybe revisit the 100, just below 110 potentially.
95,000 sounds really cheap at this point,
Oh, absolutely. And it
which
staying
is
above that
amazing
seems very
in and of
realistic.
itself, which is an amazing
Yeah.
thing to say in and of itself. All right,
Yeah,
so
if you look at SPY, it's got it over $650 billion invested in it. So that's in assets under management, and that's just SPY. I know VOO is also quite high. I believe it's at least the same as the SPY. So quite
yeah,
crazy.
we're talking $1 trillion. It's no
Yeah.
small potatoes. Yeah. Well, speaking of unlocks, because that's like an unlock into strategy, but it's assumed, put some buy pressure on Bitcoin. They're buying. But on August 7th, Trump signed an executive order to allow cryptocurrencies into 401k retirement plans. Now, in terms of unlocks, in terms of assets, we're talking about 8.9 trillion in assets that are in 401ks and retirement plans, and being described as a milestone for mainstream adoption. Everyone getting real excited. Experts warn that these actual changes could take years, though, due to regulatory and administrative challenges. So I thought that was an interesting point to this story. The order directs, it's an executive order, could get overturned too. So before it even gets rolling, who knows, The order directs agencies such as the U.S. Department of Labor to update rules under the Employment Retirement Income Security Act. I think I've heard of that. The federal law governing retirement plans require employers to act in employers' best interest. Altering these rules and creating new investment products is complex and slow, so the impact on crypto demand is likely to be limited in the near to medium term. So this is really a narrative. If this affected the price right now, it's narrative. It's not actual buy pressure. But people are excited because it really is a huge unlock when you start mentioning close to $10 trillion.
100%. And to give you an idea, the VOO and SPY combined for about $2 trillion. So we're now talking, which is essentially the market cap of Bitcoin right now. And so combine that with, and a lot of that is in 401ks. So that doubles the effect right there by allowing Bitcoin. Not only will MicroStrategy be in the S&P 500 and therefore in those 401ks and enabling them to buy more Bitcoin, but once this 401k unlock happens, then we're talking potentially an additional like 3x or 4x with the current Bitcoin market cap is being available to Bitcoin. And the bigger thing to me that I think about is once you can do it within your 401k, the number of existing crypto investors who might be putting more money into their 401ks now because of the tax advantages to buy Bitcoin. And so there might actually be even more money that becomes unlocked because instead of using post-tax money, you're using pre-tax money. And so that becomes quite exciting and can compound pretty quickly.
Yeah, and it's also, I think, helps with the argument of decreased volatility as it grows. So, okay, how far are we going to go down in the next bear market? If there's these auto buys coming in on 401ks, people aren't managing these portfolios all the time. They're putting in 2% of their paycheck. Company might match, maybe doesn't, 2, 3, 4% of their paycheck. And it's just going, and if you're long term, I'm just going to hold. This is for my retirement in 20 years. You could see, I don't know, just that kind of buy pressure could help dampen any like deep cuts into Bitcoin, especially.
I definitely agree with that. I think, but I also like the fact that people are saying, it could take multiple years for this to happen.
But
And so
it's still within Trump's term, which, when I hear that, it's like, okay, so, and then once people have it, it's harder to take things away. It's like when you give your kid like a new freedom, it's a lot harder to take it away than it was to give it to him, than not giving it to him in the first place.
yeah, well, that's it. So we're still talking the end of his terms in 2028. So it could mean that this bear market still happens. Like we still see that big downside, but then these new 401k purchases and everything could fuel that start of the new bull market and then start dampening the market, kind of reducing that volatility.
It's
So
going to
it'll be
force them into a better time to buy.
exactly. It'll be pretty interesting, especially as we start looking at kind of the macro changes and things that are kind of on the horizon. The first thing that kind of touches the macro is Donald Trump has picked crypto-friendly Stephen Moran to serve on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. At the last meeting, Jerome Powell and the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve chose not to cut rates again, but Stephen Moran is seen as crypto-friendly because based on comments that he's made in response to the original Binance CEO stepping down. He's also made comments like, I never cease to marvel at what fraction of innovation in recent decades is simply due to circumventing regulation, Uber, crypto, Airbnb. And while Binance did some evil stuff, maybe we should actually streamline a lot of regulations. And so this is kind of, he's pro crypto. He seems to be quite bullish on crypto,
But
and
it's just
he's
these comments
also
that he's being
bullish
claimed
on
as,
bullish
it's
on
just,
like changes.
yeah, it's just these comments that he's being, it's not like he's a holder or there's not a ton out there on him being pro crypto, but it's assumed he's pro cuts, right? Like being nominated by Trump. It's an interim position. But also, Moran was a senior strategist at Hudson Bay, an investment firm that has been trading claims with FTX. So dude is associated with FTX and Binance, and that's why he's pro crypto. So, but still, interesting nonetheless, and hopeful signs. I mean, there's a lot of excitement around Trump being able to pick 2 or 3 governors for the Fed, and they actually vote. So even if Powell is like, no, we're not doing it, it does change the calculations. So there's a lot of hope that we're going to see more cuts, but that shouldn't come to fruition to 2026. One of the arguments for maybe having to wait longer for an altcoin season, just because this macro portrait won't change in the short term. But we did see Bank of England cut rates 4%. So, and the percentage for whether or not we're going to cut is 36 days away, but in September have gone way up. They were down, I think at one point below 50%. We're up to 85% now. But that number does move, so we'll see. I mean, we got CPI coming out tomorrow or today as this thing is posted. So, that always could have a big effect on the outlook. If inflation comes in hot or it's just not going down, or just see how if it's looking sticky, they have another reason.
Absolutely. Canada had a pretty interesting unemployment report where the economy had unexpectedly shed 40,000 jobs, and the Canadian government had been fairly steady for the last three meetings, and so this could fuel the next kind of series of cuts in Canada as well.
Yeah, that reminds me, there was another story about the revision for the U.S. jobs report. So that got revised like way down. It kind of became a political thing here in the States, but either way, good for CPI. Good for cuts. I'm sorry, not CPI, but good for the idea of cuts.
Exactly, because
not as strong as it appears.
If the economy looks weaker, if inflation is at least steady or at least trending down, it should help increase the odds of cuts.
Yeah, so bullish, all BS, so much more jobs, we're going like crazy, but he just wants to cut rates like crazy too. And it's like, interesting man. But speaking of Trump, also on the macro, Putin and Trump are set to meet August 15th in Ukraine.
In Alaska, about Ukraine.
About Ukraine. Yeah, correct. So, on our territory, Putin coming over here, maybe a good sign. I don't know. Is that a good sign? But hopefully, got war. No good. It's just sad to even think or hear about. But that would be lovely if, some progress was made towards peace in Ukraine.
Absolutely. It would also help oil prices. It could affect certain things that are negatively impacting CPI, pushing CPI up. And so it would be quite interesting to see what comes out of that. The interesting thing too on this macro side is while we're at 85% for this upcoming meeting, the next 3 meetings all are almost all of them are projecting cuts. The October meeting is projecting another cut, and then the December meeting is just shy. It's of projecting a cut right now. It's just below 50%, presenting another cut. So it could be quite interesting to see a big series of cuts kind of leading into the end of the year, maybe helping fuel that altcoin season. So we'll see what happens, but there's definitely some interesting things in the speed run too.
Yeah, let's get into sports. The speed run. All right, let's see. Sorry, I just had to throw that in there. All right, let's go. Sheetz, the popular convenience store chain with 750 locations, is now offering Bitcoin payments. 50% off purchases paid with Bitcoin and crypto daily from 3 to 7. So one, they're accepting it, Bitcoin and crypto. I'm not sure which cryptos, but they're also offering a discount. Maybe they're looking at the success of Shake and Bake? No. What was the burger one that did it?
And
No, it wasn't In-N-Out. It was Steak and Shake. Steak and Shake?
oh, steak,
Something like that.
maybe.
But anyway, there was a big burger chain out here, kind of a competitor, In-N-Out. And they've, at least from their posts, revenue's up, all because of Bitcoiners. They're thanking Bitcoiners. So, maybe we'll see more and more of that. It's kind of like MicroStrategy has success, the other companies copy. So more and more adoption. Speaking of adoption, no more Win Lambo, dude. Win Ferrari. They are now accepting Bitcoin and cryptos payments in the US and Europe. So let's go. You gonna buy one?
Maybe if
I heard a thing about Ferrari. There's a little side note. I don't know if it's true, but I was watching something about it, and this guy wanted to buy a Ferrari, and you have to be a owner of a Ferrari in order to buy a new Ferrari. So he was literally looking at buying Ferraris, and then he had to buy a used one that cost more than the new one in order to buy the new one.
that's wild to me.
Yeah. But at the
Wild.
same token, I mean, if you ever buy a Ferrari, it's nice to know that it probably helps the resale value.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, because cars are not great investments, I mean? But it's kind of good to know, I guess. I could never drive. I would kill myself in a Ferrari so fast. Oh my God, I'll never buy a car like that. Shoot, let's go on to the
But
next one. Take it.
yeah, one of our platform's competitors, YouTube's competitors, Rumble, has announced that it is going to be integrating Bitcoin Lightning Network for tips. So that is pretty interesting to see Bitcoin Lightning also
I think
making
Square just did
its
that
way.
too. Jack Dorsey's Square just started taking Bitcoin Lightning payments, I
Yeah,
believe.
that wouldn't surprise me. But FTX is also going to be distributing out some cash, about $1.9 billion to its creditors on August 15th. So a little bit of cash hitting the market. We'll see which creditors they're kind of giving that money to, but could mean some more cash coming to crypto. And there are apparently several public treasury companies are exploring buying Sonic's S token. So apparently the Sonic's token is the next one, also potentially getting some eyes from these DATCOs.
I think this story shows there will be more, especially of Sonic. I mean, it's a rumor, so we'll see what happens with that. Sharpling Gaming, one of the largest ETH treasury companies, will have an earnings call on August 15th. That could be good for ETH and the whole ETH treasury company narrative.
Absolutely. And then kind of the last big story, and it's a little bit older, but still definitely worth mentioning, is Coinbase is integrating the ability to buy tokens on dexes that are on Base right from the Coinbase account. So if you've got a Coinbase account, you'll be able to buy things like Brett or Aerodrome or things that aren't Una or
Research coin, like
Research
smaller
Coin,
cap. Yeah.
anything that isn't officially listed on Coinbase but is on Base. You'll be able to buy it directly from your Coinbase account and hold it within your Coinbase account. So that is pretty interesting and definitely could bring a narrative, like an additional narrative to these Base tokens, because that is just an additional form of liquidity that could be coming in to those tokens, especially just looking at how many users onboard onto Coinbase.
Yeah, it is kind of like the mainstream exchange in the United States. I mean, it's not known for having good fees or whatever, but it's just well known. And I don't know, man. Coinbase has been killing it. Seems like to me, and they're
Well, it's
they're
at the
they're like first movers in like a positive regulatory environment, here in the United States. So they've been doing all right building this
Absolutely.
cycle.
And they're also doing, since they're doing all of the institutional work, a lot of the work with ETFs,
Holding a lot of Bitcoin, yeah.
they're holding a lot of Bitcoin, they're holding a lot of ETH. They've got a very positive reputation. And so that
Mhm.
is pretty good. Although I have been seeing lots of Kraken ads, surprisingly. So
Well, I
Kraken
mean,
also
they,
trying to get into that game.
they need to advertise to catch up. They're kind of like the second, I mean, they've been around a long time. I mean, living where I live, I cannot use Coinbase, but I can use Kraken. So I'm comfortable with them. And, they survived this last bear market, which any exchange doing that was, a feat, you know. And they had some scary
Absolutely.
moments for sure.
They definitely did. So it'll be interesting because I do start seeing that fuel coming for an altcoin season, whether it's late 2025, early 2026. We'll see. But I definitely see the fuel coming for that to start really igniting that fire. And so we'll see what comes of it. But thank you for watching, everybody, and we'll see you guys again soon. Hopefully
Financial
next
advice,
week.
do your own research, like and
Absolutely.
subscribe.
Just
We'll be
we're just
back.
bozos on the internet.
You have no idea.
All right. See you next time, folks.